Hi, everybody, and welcome to How to Plan Your 12-Month Grants Calendar in Under 60 Minutes. My goal is that in the next hour, we're going to be giving you 5 simple steps that you can take to start building a stronger grants calendar, whether that's for the next 30, 60, 90, or 365 days. As I just shared for folks, if you have just joined the room, it'd be great to hear from you what your name is, your organization, what you do for your nonprofit, as well as your biggest challenge related to grants calendars. And while you guys are typing that into the chat, I'll do a quick introduction to myself while we start going over the agenda for today. My name is Will, and my company, Instrumentl, regularly hosts grant workshops for the grant writing community with expert educators and best-selling authors. Our core focus, though, is we support nonprofits as well as grant writing consultants when it comes to finding, tracking, and managing their grants in one place. So every single day, we hear about some of the challenges that nonprofits as well as individual grant writers are facing when it comes to achieving their grant-seeking goals. So before we dig into the agenda for today, I want to see and hear from you guys in the comments below in the Zoom chat if any of these situations resonate with you. Maybe you are just getting started and you don't have a consistent list of good fit funders, or you're not familiar with funders in your subject area or geographic region. Or maybe you don't feel like you have enough time to actually apply for enough grants to meet your ambitious fundraising goals. If any of these are kind of resonating with you, I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Just give me a thumbs up or some sort of emoticon to let me know. And maybe you also feel overwhelmed by the list of to-dos at all times when it comes to grant seeking. I know that a lot of people are often in situations where they have small teams and they're being asked to do just about everything from start to finish when it comes to their grants. I see that Danette is sharing that she often feels overwhelmed. Brooke affirms that as well. And so it's good to see that all of you guys are experiencing many of the same things, because it means that we can tackle these problems as well with the same solutions. And then maybe you've also just generated a long list of funding opportunities and prospects. Maybe you attended our past How to Find New Good Fit Funders in Under 60 Minutes workshop, and you now have this massive list, but you have no idea what to do next. Well, you might be thinking to yourself, are grants worth all the effort? And the answer to that question is simple. It is yes. And there's actually over 87,000 grant making foundations, along with 11,000 active grants on Instrumentl alone. We're adding about 100 every single week too. And so in the case where you've never felt like there are enough opportunities for you, you can always create a free account on Instrumentl and check out some of the results, because I promise you there is an opportunity for you. It's just about finding the best ones for you. And that leads us to our agenda for today's workshop. So we're going to be covering a lot. And like I mentioned to the folks that were in the waiting room in the beginning, in the case where any of this is going a little too quickly for you, a recording will be made available along with the slides that you can review at your own time after today's workshop. But where we're going is we're first going to go over real quickly definitions. What is a grants calendar when we talk about that? What we're then going to do is we're going to talk about why grants calendars are so crucial. And then we're actually going to dig into the nitty gritty of how can we create our own grants calendar. All right. So how can we actually take the things we already have, take some new things that I'm going to introduce to you, and then create that quickly in Instrumentl. And then we'll wrap things up by talking about 5 mistakes that you can avoid when it comes to creating your grants calendar. And you're going to want to make sure that you stick until the end, because I have a special 24-page guide that's going to walk through these 5 steps more in depth to help you when it comes to creating your grants calendar. But first, now that we have this agenda out of the way, let's start by digging into what exactly is a grants calendar. So when we think about the phrase grants calendar, what we're talking about here is a grants calendar is where you are looking to track your current and past grant applications. It's going to be home to all of the important information that helps you stay strategic around your grant seeking. So on the right-hand side here, what you can see is I have an environmental project set up in Instrumentl, and this tracker has a breakdown in terms of the opportunities that I'm pursuing, as well as things like the deadline, the status, the amounts, and notes around these particular opportunities. And so similarly, when you are creating your grants calendar, this might be something where in its current form, it's in an old school spreadsheet or something like that. But essentially what you're using is you're using this as a way to just stay on top of everything. And there's 5 reasons why grants calendars are so important. The first reason is because it just improves your overall time management. By having a grants calendar, you'll make sure that you never miss any grant or reporting deadlines, as well as you're able to map backwards on some of the key tasks and work that is going to be done by multiple team members as opposed to just by yourself. And that naturally leads us to the second reason why grant calendars are so important. They help promote collaboration. So in this situation, what that means is that you can create tasks for each other. You can report on your goals in terms of every quarter or every half year or every year, where you guys are in your fundraising goals, as well as whether you are exceeding, meeting, or not meeting your respective goals. And by having this sort of grants calendar, you also build a library of records for yourself. So this is something in which you'll be able to establish a system of fundraising in terms of being able to reevaluate past funders that you may have potentially either not had the chance to apply for, or maybe you were declined the last funding cycle, but now you want to revisit it because you've either introduced a new program, initiative, or you just feel like this is the year as opposed to the prior year. And then you might also find grants calendars helpful because they help you elevate your strategic planning. When you're able to track forward progress and identify areas for your organization to improve, that helps you actually provide clarity and specificity as to what you're doing strategically to move your organization forward in its grants. It's one thing to just set an arbitrary goal like, last year we raised 100 grand in grants. This year we're going to raise 200 grand. And it's another thing to say, last year we raised 100 grand in grants. This year, we're raising 200 grand in grants, and here's exactly how we plan to do so. And so by being able to elevate your strategic planning with the grants calendar, you can actually have confidence not only in yourself, but also in your organization as everybody's on the same page as to what you guys are working towards. And then when it comes to the fifth reason why grants calendars are so important, it's because you can create capacity beyond grants or fundraising. Grants are ultimately just one source of funding, but there are so many other opportunities out there as well. And when you're able to systemize your grants program, it means that you can then allocate remaining bandwidth for your team around efforts such as program development, as well as reputation building. And that mention that I just talked about in terms of creating a grant system relates to this next quote that I want to cover before we start talking about the 5 steps that you can take to create your grants calendar. And this quote is from James Clear's Atomic Habits. If you've attended any of our other How to X Under 60-Minute workshops, you know we love this quote. And the reason why is because it really highlights for us the context and idea behind building a system as opposed to just setting arbitrary goals around your grants. It reads, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Your goal is your desired outcome, whereas your system is the collection of daily habits that will get you there. So this year, spend less time focusing on outcomes and more time focusing on the habits that precede the results." And the reason why this is so important is because, again, it goes back to that point I was saying earlier. It's one thing to just set an arbitrary goal for what you want to fundraise for in the next year. And it's another thing to have the exact 7 or 10 or 15 steps that your team is going to take to actually give yourself the best chances for success. And in the case where you don't have a system in place or you don't have a clear strategy in place, that's okay. By the end of today's workshop, we're going to begin to start formulating that around your grants calendar so that you can feel a little bit more confident and bring a little bit more order to the chaos that is often grant seeking. So now that we've gone over some background context, let's start digging into the meat of today's presentation, which is the 5 steps to create your own grants calendar. And when we're talking about this in the context of our grants calendar, what our end goal is today is we want to really make sure that we have some sort of tracker that is going to consolidate all of our upcoming opportunities or opportunities of interest to us, all of our upcoming deadlines, some of the statuses of those deadlines, some tasks, as well as notes for the rest of our team. And we're going to build this within the context of Instrumentl. It's okay if you don't have an Instrumentl account yet, because we're going to create free ones for everybody as well. And we'll leave time for that. But essentially, by the end of it, we are going to have much more specificity in terms of exactly what we're working on next, whether that's in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or in the next year. So the first step when it comes to creating an effective grants calendar is determining what exactly is important to track. So in the case where you are following along with me. Well, what I want you to do is I want you to look at these lists as I give them to you and jot down, whether with pen and paper or just type it out on a notes app on your computer, jot down what exactly is resonating for you that you think is important for your teams. So here are just some of the most common things that we have seen when we've looked at hundreds and hundreds of ways that folks create their grants trackers on Instrumentl. They track things such as internal due dates. That might be things in which you might have an internal due date in terms of the initial proposal draft, or you might have some reporting deadlines coming up and things like that, or you have some sort of accounting requirements where you need to sync up with your accounting team on that. You might also have things like scheduled project milestones or team check-ins. So if you're in a team where it's a handful of you guys and you're working on a variety of different grants, well, maybe it's something in which every other Friday you have a team meeting. In that situation, you want to make note of when the next team meeting is for you to be talking about a particular effort or initiative. You also want to look at things such as the submission process, right? How exactly and where can you apply to this particular grant opportunity you have in mind? The reason why this is really helpful to have in the context of your grants calendar is because it'll save you time as well as everybody else on your team time in terms of just kind of, jostling to try to find the right link of where exactly you can work on that application. Other common things include the amount of the grant, what the grant is actually for. In the case, for example, you're working with an after-school tutoring program, well, you might have a STEM program and you might have a literature program and you might have a technology access program. And so by knowing how you're bucketing out your grants in your tracker, that can be super useful as well in terms of keeping things all in one place. And lastly, how exactly will funds be used? So these are what I would say on this first slide. I would say these are the ones where you can really kind of focus on the core essentials. But as we move on forward in the next slide, these are going to be more of the things that are typically a little bit more granular or things that might be dependent on exactly what you are working on in your particular grant tracker. So here are a few more things that you might consider that we've also seen folks find valuable in their grants trackers. You might want to do things like research regarding the grants organization. This is where you're going to want to actually dig into the Form 990 data and identify whether or not alignment exists. How can you tell if alignment exists? Well, some of the most common ways you can do that is by looking at things like previous grant recipients, the projects or areas that they typically fund, as well as just their mission statement and key people to see whether or not there is alignment in terms of what they say they're doing and what they're actually funding. You're also going to want to make sure that, again, in the case where you're working in a multi-person team where grant writing is divvied up, that it's really crystal clear in your tracker exactly who is going to be owning different parts of the process. Sometimes nonprofits have their accounting do a lot of the initial budget work, whereas other times it's the grant writer that's doing everything from start to finish. Or in other teams, I've seen it where the grant writer proposes pretty much the initial 1 or 2 drafts before it's then sent over to the executive director for final review and revisions. And then you'll look at things like the proposal status. Where is it exactly in terms of your priority list? Do you have any board member connections that could help you get a foot in the door in terms of understanding what the funder wants and whatnot? And then you're going to want to obviously make sure that you also have your submission dates and your outcome or amount raised. So assuming that you've taken this first step and you've determined what is important to track, the goal here is for you to take this step 1 and identify anywhere from 5 to 10 of these factors that you are going to want to incorporate into your own grants calendar. And in the case where you're watching along and you don't have these pieces of information with you right now, that's okay. What's important for you to take away from this first step, though, is simply identifying what's really most important for your organization to track. It's possible that there's going to be secondary factors or tertiary factors later on, but I would focus first on what you think is just absolutely vital when it comes to getting back to that core idea of building a system that works for you and your nonprofit when it comes to the grants calendar. So assuming that you've gone ahead and taken that first step, the second step when it comes to creating effective grants calendar is to actually take stock of your existing relationships. To do that, what you can do is you can use this free grant tracker template. I'm going to post it into the Zoom chat right now. And what you can do is you can make a copy of this template in the case where you don't have one for yourself. And what it's going to do is it's going to break down things like the grant opportunity names, the statuses, exactly what year you're looking for, where it is in the process, any upcoming tasks and deadlines. And you'll notice that this template pretty much closely mirrors what we came out of step 1 with. We have some core things that are definitely important to us in terms of keeping track of our next, few milestones in our grants calendar. So what you're going to do is, you're probably not going to get to this all within this workshop since we have a lot of core foundational content to cover. But what you're going to do potentially later today or later in the week is you're going to use this copy of this template and you're going to fill in 2 to 3 years worth of your grant efforts. And in the case where you have no existing relationships, you're just new to grants and you're just starting out and finding yourself in this workshop, well, you can always skip to step number 3 there. But essentially what you're going to want to do is carve out anywhere from an hour to 3 hours with your team in order to work on this tracker. This can just be a good place for you guys to take a step back and reflect on what you've done in the last few years. It's often what I've heard from folks that take this advice to heart. It's often a really great time as well to actually take an honest look in terms of what exactly has gone well for us, as well as what hasn't gone well for us in the last 2 to 3 years of fundraising with respect to grants. And in the case where you do have an existing tracker, I would encourage you to convert it to the format that I shared in the template. And the reason why is because the following steps are all going to kind of connect with this foundational step of, getting it into this format. And Patricia's asking, can we export something from our Instrumentl account? We're hoping to integrate prospective opportunities with current funders and reporting deadlines. Yeah, you can actually create a report for yourself. And you can do that in either CSV or PDF. People that export in CSVs usually do so in order to bring it into a different CRM or something like that. Whereas people that do it in a PDF might be presenting it to a board or an executive director. So once you have taken stock of your existing relationships, we have tackled 2 of the 5 steps. First, we have figured out exactly what's actually important for our team. And second, we have actually taken stock of the work that we have already done. That naturally leads us to the next phase when it comes to creating a grants calendar. And that is where you are going to want to look at building a short list of opportunities. And Danette, you can check the Zoom chat right there. There's the template again, once more for the grant tracker template. So step number 3 is building a short list of opportunities. So we're going to use Instrumentl to do this. I'm going to send a second link into the chat for folks that are with us today that already have Instrumentl accounts. You can just go ahead and log into your account. For folks that are new to us today, you can create your free Instrumentl account using the link in the Zoom chat. What we're going to do in the next 10 to 15 minutes is we're going to set up our projects together, double check for understanding in terms of how we can make sure that we give ourselves the best list of good fit funders. And then we're going to start filling in and finding opportunities that we can save to our tracker to then combine with the things that we did in step 2 of bringing our work into our existing relationships into Instrumentl. So when you go ahead and click that link, you're going to be redirected to a page that looks something like this. I'm going to click that link along with you guys and then follow along with me if you are new. Again, if you are in the room and you happen to already have an Instrumentl account, you can feel free to just log into your Instrumentl account and give me 2 or 3 minutes while I help set folks up that are new onto this site. So from here, what I'm going to do is I am just going to go ahead and create a new account. And when I do that, I'm just going to fill in my name. And then from here, I'm then going to type in a password. And then I'm going to select 501c3 for nonprofit. In this case, I'm doing a grants calendar workshop, but you're going to title it after your organization. And then you're going to select your operating revenue and then your 501c3 status. So again, I am clicking that link in the Zoom chat. And then once you're ready and filling this out, you can click the next button. When you get here, what I want you to do is just go ahead and book a time for a follow-up in terms of, this is going to be a group session. It's actually going to be with the same folks from today's workshop. So it'd be a great time for you to reconnect. But essentially what you can do is book a time for the group sessions coming up in the next few weeks. That way you can double check what you guys applied from today's session, as well as ask Karen any key questions that might be happening in terms of after you've had the chance to review more of your account. But at this point, when you are at the right page, you are going to be on this screen, which essentially says, let's create your first project. Give me a thumbs up in the Zoom chat when you are at the same place as me. For folks that already have Instrumentl accounts, when you are at your project section, if you want to go ahead and click edit project, you can also follow along as I go through the steps of making a really precise project that's going to give you the best list of shortlist in terms of grant opportunities. So I'm going to wait for the chat for 2 to 3 minutes to see for a few reactions. I can see that Suzanne has given me a thumbs up. I'll look for a couple others before I keep on going. I want to make sure that everybody is able to follow along though, as we start digging into step number 3. I see Marnie just gave me a thumbs up as well. It's great to see that you're following along. Awesome. I see Katie just gave me a thumbs up, and it looks like Char just gave me a thumbs up as well. I'm going to give it a few more minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and start setting things up. If you are looking for where people are going for this, again, you can go into the Zoom chat. It says, go here for creating your free Instrumentl account. Just click that link, and from there, you'll be able to set up your free account. All right, so I'm gonna look for 1 or 2 more. Brooke gave me the thumbs up. Awesome. Looks like Michael gave me a thumbs up as well. And so at this point, it seems like most of you guys are tracking with me. So I'm going to keep on going. But if you're still on that first page, don't worry. I have another pause point coming up as well. So take your time and we'll keep on going in terms of setting up our projects. So when it comes to creating your first project, the first question you want to be able to answer is, where is your organization registered? This is where your headquarters is for your organization. In this case, I'm going to use the example where I'm an after-school tutoring program in Los Angeles County. So I'm going to look for my specific county. And what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to then select save and continue. Once you reach that second stage, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to title your project. When it comes to project naming, what I recommend for you is that you be as specific as possible. So the example I shared earlier today is the example in which I have an after-school tutoring program that focuses on STEM. I also have literature, and I also have technology access as a whole. And so in this case, I'm going to set up this project in the context of STEM education. And let's assume that I work with middle school students. So similarly for your case, if you are in the audience today and you are working on a particular program or initiative, what I want you to do is be as specific as possible in what that is that you're fundraising for. Obviously, you can be more general, but I recommend you take the specific approach, because once we learn and master how to create a project, we can create multiple projects and then filter out very niche searches for you. From here, you're going to then select the applicant type, and this is where you're going to select nonprofit. From here, you're going to answer whether or not you are associated with a faith-based organization. I saw a couple folks coming in from faith-based organizations in the chat earlier during the welcome stage. And so in that case, you would select yes. And then what I recommend is you select your religious affiliation and that you keep it toggled to grants for both faith-based and secular programs. In the case where you are not faith-based, in my case, I am not, I just answer this question as no, and I move right along into step number 3. So in this third step, this is where we're going to start digging into the actual areas that our program serves. So maybe my headquarters is in Los Angeles, but actually I serve both Los Angeles, Alameda County, and some other counties. So what I can do is I can go ahead and select county or state, and I can just start typing in specifically for my counties. So in this situation, I've selected these 2 counties. When you are setting up your specific locations, I want you guys to be as specific as possible. I'll reiterate this over and over again throughout this presentation because it's so important for us to be specific when we are setting ourselves up for success here. And the reason why is because it's going to go all the way down to the county level before zooming out to the state level, before zooming out to the entire United States. All right, from here, you're going to select your fields of work. This is where you're going to want to think about some keywords or phrases that might be commonly used to refer to your work or your areas of impact. So in my case, I do tutoring, so I'm going to search for tutoring and mentoring. I'm also going to do things like after school, because it's an after school program. I did middle school, so I'm going to select that. My project is around STEM education, so I'm going to look for STEM education. And then in the case where I'm kind of, it's midday, there's a lot going on, I'm starting to think about keywords. Well, what I can do is I can go ahead and click browse all categories and then expand out the education section. And from here, what you can then do is you can go ahead and select some other fields of work that might be interesting to you. Here's my general piece of advice for folks. You are aiming to have 3 to 7 fields of work. That is going to give you the best sort of results because it's not going to be too specific and it's not going to be too broad that you're going to get a wide mix of opportunities. So in this case, I've selected 5 and I'm going to go ahead and keep on going. All right, Danette said, can the project take place in different states? Absolutely. Instead of what I did in terms of selecting counties, I would just select multiple states in that section. All right, so from here, the final questions to answer is what size grants are we looking for and what exactly are the funds going to be used for? So in this situation, I'm a small nonprofit, so maybe I want to make sure that the minimum is at least $1,000. That makes sure that the time investment is worth it. For me, but your mileage may vary depending on where you're at with your nonprofit or your clients in the case where you're a grant writing consultant in terms of what is meaningful to that organization. And then in the final question, I'm then selecting what the funds will be used for. So in this case, I am going to select project program as well as general operating expenses because that's what my project is most closely related to. And then click the save and exit button. Give me another thumbs up in the Zoom chat. I'm going to give it a minute or two for folks to catch up with me here. And then from here, if you are having any difficulty in terms of thinking about some fields of work and things like that, you can let me know. But I'm going to give us a second to pause just so that folks can catch up. Marnie just gave me the first thumbs up. Great to see. I can see Katie gave me a thumbs up, and I'm going to keep on waiting for a minute or two while we let other folks follow along. All right, so I see that Michael just gave me a thumbs up as well. Good to see. I love it when everybody is able to stick with me in terms of all this content. I'm gonna look for one or a handful more, and then I'll move right along to the next stage of the setup. Brooke gave me a thumbs up as well. Good to see. So just to recap for folks, as you're setting up your projects, some of the key notes that I flagged for you guys, be as specific as possible when you're setting up your project name, be as specific as possible when it comes to your location of impact, because it will factor that into your search results, and be as specific as possible when it comes to fields of work. Your goal is to get 3 to 7 fields of work. And what I would personally recommend is if you're in a small team, it's great for you to set at least some sort of minimum in place so that it's worth your time as well. I got a thumbs up from Suzanne as well. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to keep on going. But again, like I said, there's always going to be pausing points. I try to pace these so that they're swift, but not too swift. And so in the case where you are still in the steps, don't worry about it. I'm going to be in this next section for a little bit. The goal for our next section, though, is we're going to start creating that short list. All right, so here you can see that I have found 298 grants for my STEM education middle school program. I can click the Let's Go button. And then the first thing I want to draw your attention to is we are in this Matches tab. All right, so the opportunity matches are going to represent active and open grant RFPs that are available for us to apply to. The Funder Matches tab are going to show us potentially funders that are going to be good fits for us, but might be invite only, or they are the situation where they don't have a website. All right, so that's just the distinction between the two there. So from here, what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to focus on the opportunity matches for today because we're trying to build a short list of immediate new opportunities to add to our grants calendar. So what I can do is I can look at this dropdown, set it to either best match, or if I were starting to plan ahead for my future grants calendar and things like that, I might start to look at deadline to see where I might have gaps in my grants calendar that's coming up. So maybe I already identified the next 3 or 4 opportunities I'm going to pursue in the first 3 weeks of March, but maybe I have some openings in that last week of March or in that first week of April that I could look at. So in the case where you already kind of have a grants calendar, you can sort it by deadline. But in the case where you're starting kind of fresh, I recommend you keep it on best match for now. The next thing that you can look at is in this drop-down filter, you can actually filter it based off of funding use as well as funder type. Why would you do this? Well, you would do it in the case where, for example, you know that you're better at getting, funder types in terms of private foundations as opposed to corporate foundations and so on, or that, there's a particular funding use that you want to fundraise for. DeMarco, I see that you just entered the room. I'm going to paste the link once more for you so you can follow along. Just create your accounts, create your project, and then you should be able to catch up with us. But essentially from here, what you're looking at in this short list is we are going to be looking to save at least 3 new opportunities to the researching stage of our tracker. And as we do this, I want you guys to answer some key questions such as, what is the grant maker's mission and does it align to your initiatives? Do you meet the eligibility requirements? Is there a giving history similar to you? And can your team meet all the requirements? So to do this, I'm going to kind of show you as an example here, in my case, how I might think about this particular situation. So let's say, for example, I am going through this list and I'm looking first at this New York Life Foundation. The first question I need to ask myself is, what is the grant maker's mission and does it align to my initiatives? So let's go ahead and look at why this is being shown to us. It's being shown to us because there is a field of work match for after-school summer educational programs. We match the criteria in terms of nonprofit applicant type, and we also match the needs in terms of funding use as well as the project and residency. What I can also see just from what Instrumentl has summarized for me is that there is a 990 snapshot where there's a ton of grantees in different places, right? And so what you can do is you can go ahead and scroll down and look at the grant maker's mission from here. So here you can see that on behalf of the New York Life Foundation, the After School Alliance invites out-of-school time programs to apply for a competitive grant opportunity to support and bolster the ability of after-school and summer learning programs to prepare middle school students for success in high school, college, and life. So right off the bat, this is a great opening statement for us. You can actually also see how as you skim this further, it's talking about how their educational enhancement grant-making strategy is aimed at providing opportunities for students in middle school to become better and more prepared for high school. This is direct alignment to what we do, right? At the end of the day, we're a STEM education after-school tutoring program. We focus on middle school students, and this is as if this grant was just made perfectly for us, right? And so that's something that you want to look for first and foremost. Danette, if you want to adjust the search terms, you can click the top right edit project and then go back into your fields of work and select it from there. And Erica, I'll try to leave some time for Q&A. It won't be built into the core 60 minutes since it's going to be a tight 60 minutes from start to finish and all the content that we have to cover, but I will be available at the very end for some questions as well. And I'm going to try to tackle as many as I can as I'm going along as well. All right, so I've answered the question of, is this grant maker's mission aligned to my initiatives? The second thing that I can do is I can look at eligibility requirements. Here you can see that we do meet the requirements. It's 501c3 status, middle school youth are served, high percentage of low-income youths. And then what I can also look at is I can look through the funder to see if there's a giving history similar to me. In this case, I'm going to be looking for things like, what is the average grant amount or the median grant amount? And then I'm going to also be looking at what the trends look like over the years. I can see that actually between 2018 and 2019, the average grant amount went down. So maybe this foundation had some sort of troubles or some sort of differences in terms of what they adjusted in their programs. And then what you can also look at is you can look at specifically where awards have been given to. So in this case, what I'm looking for is I am looking for the state of California. And as I do that, I can go ahead and scroll through and look at the 253 or so of grantees who have received funding from this particular program. And I can see a ton of them are $500, but maybe I can sort it. You can see actually some of the bigger grants here. Boys and Girls Clubs of San Francisco got 50 grand from these guys. Safe Packages also got some 50 grand grants and things like that. But overall, what I'm looking for is I can see that there's a very general funding pattern in terms of education, especially around these middle school programs. So that's great to see. It's great to see representation. What you're looking for when you look at this graph in the United States is the representation either in my state or in the surrounding region around me. And then as I scroll down further, I can also look at specifically things like giving by NTE code. This will affirm whether or not what the grant maker says their interests are actually aligns with where their money is going. So in this case, it's a lot of it's going to education. So right off the bat, in the last 2 or 3 minutes, I have quickly done my research and I now feel really good about this opportunity. I'm going to add this to my shortlist for new opportunities to send to researching. So to do that, I'm going to hit that big save button that has the heart. I'm going to save it to my project in the researching stage. Maybe I'll add a note to say, hey, let's review this at Friday's meeting. And then I'm going to go ahead and save that. And what's going to happen is going to move that from my opportunity matches to my tracker. All right. And then you're going to take the same process over and over again as you work through these results. What's really cool about the projects that everybody has set up today is that Instrumentl is always going to be looking for you in terms of new active opportunities that match your project. So what that means is that every Thursday, you're going to receive an email saying, hey, here are some of the new opportunities for you, Amanda. Hey, here are the new opportunities for your project, Amy, and so on. And so this is always going to be an ongoing search for you, and it's always going to be updated with some of the latest deadlines that might be coming up. So what your goal is going to be is try to identify at least one right now. Later on today, take a step back, go back into your account, and then try to save at least 3 new opportunities to your researching tab and go through that same process again. I'm going to go through this process just one more time, just in case for the folks that are just joining us, or the folks that have just been kind of setting up their projects for a second are able to go through that same framework that I just went through when assessing opportunities. So first question I ask is, what is the grant maker's mission and does it align to my initiatives? In this case, this is with Edison International. I can see that I'm being shown this by Instrumentl because of its match to career college preparation and STEM education. I can see I match its funding uses in terms of project program. I can see that there's a really specific location match in terms of Los Angeles County. And so what I can see here is as I start to read through this, the Edison International is one of the largest corporate charitable contributors in Southern California. They support programs that tackles tough issues such as what? Helping kids make a difference in the world by studying science, technology, engineering, and math. This is a perfect match again, right? And so what's really beautiful about these sorts of opportunities is that Instrumentl's algorithm is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us if we follow along really carefully with the project setup. So I tackled that first question. Next question is, what are the eligibility requirements? Well, in this situation, we can see that one of their giving priorities is education. As we scroll down, we can see they're partnering with local nonprofits that are focused in education. We hit that requirement. If we really wanted to dig into it, we can always go to the funder's website. But in this situation, I feel good. We can visit the website here. But in this case, what I'm then going to look at is I'm going to look through and see if there's a giving history. In this case, because this is a foundation that's super localized, it's possible that we haven't been able to digitize their 990 for now. But that said, I already know that there's a close focus because it was mentioned on the homepage of this opportunity that this is an opportunity specific in the region. So in this situation, I think this is interesting to me. I'm going to go ahead and save this as well into my researching tab. All right, so some quick questions tackling these for some folks. Amy asked, can you add opportunities to the tracker that are not in the match list? Absolutely. I'm going to go over that in just a little bit in step number 4 of today's 5 steps. So stay tuned there. Amanda, it's great to hear that you already found 2 in terms of good matches. And Patricia asked, how do opportunities get on the calendar you provided earlier? Perfect question. Perfect segue. I love this crew. All right. So before I dig into that and answer Patricia's question there, what I also wanted to flag for you is in the case where you want to find more longer term relationships to build, your funder matches might take a little bit more time to fill because we have to search through thousands of entries. But essentially, you'll notice that now this is updated on my account. And these are also going to be opportunities that are either invite only or don't have a website. So why is that really good? Well, it's good for me in the case where I want to find some pockets to start doing some local or regional location-based relationship building. In this case, for example, the Weingart Foundation is number 1 that's being shown to me. I can research all about them here. It'll even pull in information about the fact that you can see here they accept applications. And I can see all the main trends about this particular foundation. So I can see 24% of awards have gone to new grantees. This is a very unique statistic that only Instrumentl can do of all the grant tools out there. And so really great tool, really great way for us to potentially do some more research, reach out for a call. I'm going to go ahead and save this opportunity to my tracker. All right, so a question was asked by Patricia: how do opportunities get on the calendar that I provided earlier, or are we manually entering our research or planned opportunities? So what you can do is you can navigate now to your tracker tab. And the goal here is that we are going to start organizing our tracker. This is step number 4 for us. All right. And so the way you can do this is you can click the add new button on the right-hand side, and then you can either add one individually or you can upload many. And when you upload many, this is where you're going to upload the template that you filled everything out beautifully in step number 2. From there, our team will take care of it for you in terms of importing the rest of your tracker. So again, to go over those 2 options, you can either add an individual opportunity by clicking add new and then look up the funder, add the opportunity that way, or you can go ahead and upload many, and you're going to want to upload your opportunities from there. When you do that, you're going to see that the opportunities that you have saved from your matches are now also living in your tracker along with the work that you did in step number 2. And the next step is here. What we're going to start digging into is how to start identifying high potential speculative opportunities and opportunistic ones. So going back into our presentation here, we're at step number 4 now. And this is where we are going to be organizing our tracker. All right. So like I mentioned, you can click the add new button and then upload many, import that template from step number 2. Now you have your existing opportunities that you've already worked on in the past, and you've also got your new opportunities that you've shortlisted from step number 3. The next step is we're going to look for high potential versus speculative or opportunistic ones. We're going to take stock of rolling versus hard deadlines. A reminder here, Instrumentl is going to help you with automated deadlines. So in the case where a funder changes a deadline on you, we will update that in your tracker. That is one of the reasons why I've emphasized earlier on, even if you have your own existing tracker, it is useful to bring your work into Instrumentl, because we will also do some of the automated updates for you instead of you having to carve out an hour every single week to check the 15, 20 opportunities that you're applying for and whether or not the funder changed something on you. So from here, as you're organizing your tracker, I wanted to propose a few ideas for you guys of how you might go about doing that. The first thing you can do when you navigate to your tracker tab is you will notice that you can actually create tasks for every single grant opportunity. So what I recommend is if, for example, you saved 2 like Amanda has, go into those opportunities, click into them right now, and then scroll down and you're going to see a task section. In that task section, what you can do is you can create a variety of different tasks. It can be general, milestone, reporting, whatever floats your boat. Here are a few example tasks that I have personally seen people use with respect to their trackers. You might create a task for yourself, for example, to run through a decision matrix or a logic model, to reach out to past grantees in case you want to do more due diligence, connect with the funder like I did with my funder that I saved from funder matches, or connect with proofread the final proposal, submit the proposal, complete reporting, so on, right? The next thing you want to do after you complete the creation of your tasks is you want to settle on who exactly is owning what. You can use the owner feature for this. Again, all you need to do is select into that opportunity, and then from there, you're going to be able to select an owner in the dropdown. The next thing you're going to want to do after you do tasks and owners is you're going to want to look at the notes section. Here are 3 ideas that I have for you in terms of how you can use that notes section effectively. The first thing you can do is you can create a color code system. It's really easy to do this. All you need to do is go to open up your emoji keyboard or go to the site emojipedia.org, and then you can create your own little model for yourself. Here you can see what I've done is I have a kind of like a red light, green light sort of model where it's if it's a high chance, it's green, medium chance, and then low chance, it's red. And then what you can also do is you can highlight some key information. So this is where you maybe are going to copy and paste things from the eligibility or overview stuff. And you might cover things around, leaving notes like you notice that there's a lot of past grantees from this funder that are really similar to your organization. So the key takeaway here in the notes section is come up with some sort of way that you can summarize information in sort of 1 to 3 sentences that's going to be useful and relevant to either yourself or your team. And that leads me to the third idea on the team point of doing anything that promotes collaboration. So maybe you're going to have something like leaving a message for syncing on this with the team on Friday. Maybe you want to review this, by 3:15, or let's get board feedback on this. So when you have taken these steps, again, the 3 steps within step 4 here is we've tackled task, we've added ownership, and we've added notes. That is when we are going to have something that looks a little bit like this. So looking at example number 1, as you can see on my right-hand side here, for this homeless and elderly project, I have my high chance, medium chance, and low chance opportunities. I have notes in terms of I've copy and pasted the phrases from the overview and the eligibility requirements that align well to this particular project. I see that I have assigned tasks for milestones in terms of what's coming up here. And I also have owners all set up. So what you see is this beautiful sort of overlay that is essentially going to keep us on track from start to finish for every single opportunity that we've done due diligence on. So that's if you take my example number 1. What if you do example number 2, where you're just highlighting key information itself? Well, in that case, it's going to look a little bit like this, a little bit less dynamic in terms of, the color coding system and whatnot, but maybe, you just like to keep things simple in this case. So what you can see here is what I've copied is I have copied specifically the alignment of the opportunity to specifically the project in mind. So in this case, this is a food security project. And what I'm covering is I'm covering things like how it's proud to support hundreds of organizations working tirelessly around hunger, basic necessities, food for the hungry, keyword phrases that connect back to my prior research. It's always good to leave notes like this because, like you saw earlier when you were creating your free accounts here in your searches, Instrumentl is going to find hundreds of potential good fits for you. And so it's easy to forget about the one good fit because another good fit pops up. All right. So from here, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to settle on some next steps after this workshop. The first thing that I recommend is that you connect with your team and you create a standard operating procedure or an SOP for grants. This is where I always recommend that folks ask themselves the 5 W's and how. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. And then what I want you to do first as just a step number 1 to get onto first base is prioritize the 2 or 3 most important things to organize your tracker. Maybe for now, you're not at the place where you can have something like my example number 1 where everything's beautifully filled out. That's okay. It just means that it's going to take a little bit more time and a little bit more iteration to get to that final state. But what you can do potentially by the end of next week, for example, is just have tasks in place. And then after you have all your tasks in place, you might have owners all in place. And once you have owners all in place, you might then add notes in place. It doesn't have to be done. It doesn't have to be built in one day. It can be just something in which you're gradually improving your grant calendar and your grant tracker as you get more comfortable with building your sort of system. All right. So from this point in time, what you're going to do is you're then going to review and update your tracker. So at this point in time, what you want to do is you want to settle on a team cadence for doing this. The most common recommendations that I provide here is it can be daily, weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, really depends on your organization. In the case where grant funding is making up the majority of your fundraising efforts, well, maybe it's something that you want to do on a more frequent basis than some of those, longer term turnarounds here. But you want to commit to a cadence. And the way you can commit to that cadence is you can set a calendar holdout to your team, essentially settling on just reviewing the grants tracker or having a sync on the grants tracker. And when you're doing this, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're also factoring in some of the reporting requirements and the timelines for renewing grants. Remember, as you are building your grants calendar, it's not only supposed to work for the new opportunities you're finding, but also for the opportunities you've already got in the bag. You want to make sure that your grants calendar is working year in and year out so that you make sure that you're renewing all of the existing relationships you already have. That's why we went back to that step number 2 of taking stock of our existing relationships. And what you can do is you can download your CSV or PDF reports at least once a month to do this in Instrumentl and just incorporate some reflection time, whether that's quarterly, biannually, or at the end of the year. If you want to do that, in the top right corner of your Instrumentl account, you're going to see the button to download a report. If you're on a free trial, you won't be able to create a customized report for now, but if you're already a customer of ours, you can customize your report and just go ahead and download a PDF or CSV. Just to show that really quickly in Instrumentl, what you can do is you click this guy, the download report button in the top right of your project. From here, you select your projects. For example, that food security project, you select the statuses, the date ranges that you want, and you go ahead and create your report. And just like that, you'll have your PDF in place in terms of prepping that for your next sync meeting in terms of reviewing it with your team. And then just to review some of the other recent stuff that I just went over as well, what you can do is, again, in your notes section down here, you can leave those emoticons. If you want the shortcut to how to toggle that emoticon keyboard, if you're on a Mac computer, it's your Control Command Space button. And then in the case where you don't have that, you can just go to emojipedia.org and copy that in. And you can also create tasks for yourself over here, as well as set ownership and things like that. In the case where you want to start renewing and planning ahead for next year, you can always just click more options, click the duplicate button. From here, you can just duplicate it, and then you can start working on it for the following year. Why is that really useful? Well, multi-year tracking is always super important when it comes to grants. So when you are working on something for multiple years, you can see that I've just gone ahead and planned that for 2023 in a click of a button. All right, so hopping back in, let's assume that you've had that meeting. Let's assume that you're having that reporting set in place. Just as a reminder, these boards love these reports. Also, executive directors love these reports. So if you're a grant writer and you want to make yourself look really good, you can generate reports in the click of a button here. When you're having these meetings, here are some starter questions, reflection questions that you want to ask. First question, what was most helpful about our tracker? Why is that useful? Because these trackers are meant to be useful. It's not meant to be just something that, we're spending time filling out for the purposes of filling it out. The second question is, what were 2 or 3 things that we wish we had on our tracker? How can we incorporate these going forward? Maybe there's something where, the ideas I've given you are just the starting base, and you realize that actually something that's really useful is using the checkbox emoticon and having like a certain number of checkboxes, which will reflect when accounting has reviewed everything and when your colleague has reviewed the proposal or so on. Whatever it is, whatever works for you, that's what you want to incorporate in refining your process. You also want to ask about what potentially caused the most stress for you guys during the last cycle, right? From here, you might be able to build in systems or tasks or notes and things like that that are going to help alleviate some of that stress the next time around. Maybe it's something where, for example, you were constantly struggling to organize everything in terms of, the application links and things like that. So maybe that's how you use the notes section. And then you also want to ask yourself things like, what wasn't useful about our tracker? Can we remove it? And then lastly, did we actually follow our team SOP? This is probably the thing that most people struggle with in the long term when it comes to grants calendars. They are super bullish on creating a grants calendar, but they go about actually doing it, and then sticking with the follow through is really tough. What I would generally recommend here is those calendar holds can be a great way to introduce a broader level of accountability with your team. But what I would ask your team in those situations is why or why not in terms of if we followed SOP. All right, so we've gone over the 5 steps. Now let's dig into 5 mistakes that we can avoid when creating your grants calendar. And then I'll talk about how you can get your freebie for today's workshop. And if you're following along with me right now, it'd be great to hear from you guys in the Zoom chat. Give me a thumbs up, emoticon, some sort of reaction as we now hop into the 5 mistakes to avoid when creating your grants calendar. All right, so getting started. Katie just gave me a thumbs up. Jeanette just gave me a thumbs up. Awesome. The first mistake when it comes to avoiding mistakes in creating your grants calendar is including the wrong things. So what are some of the wrong things? Well, we went over this earlier, but one of the #1 things that people struggle with is finding good fit funders. So if you are finding grants that are not relevant to your organization, or there's explicit rules that they're saying, for example, you need to be a 501c3 in this particular area and you are not, well, you're wasting your time and you're also wasting the funder's time. So that's often going to be one of the biggest mistakes that people make. They try to force a fit. It's just like fitting a square in a round hole and whatnot. But essentially, that's not going to be really useful when it comes to your grants calendar, because if you're just saving some loosey-goosey fits, well, you're just diluting the information and the quality of information in your grants calendar. All right. Another thing is distracting notes or conversations. The notes section is meant to be intentional. It's meant to be something that actually helps move your team forward with that opportunity. So in the case where the notes aren't working for you, we'll have a quick team meeting in terms of how you guys can all get on the same page. You're also going to look at things like potentially avoiding sharing things like incorrect or outdated information. That could be the case where, the funder has actually had a change in guard in terms of the program officers, and you've been reaching out to a dead email inbox and you didn't even realize it, right? And then you might also just have something in which you have unrealistic expectations. It's really important that, it's not the theme for this workshop today, but team bandwidth is always so important. And it's something that, grant writing teams often overlook when it comes to the expectations that are set for that team. So first things first, including the wrong things, absolutely a mistake you want to avoid in your grants calendar. Another thing is not budgeting enough time for reporting, right? So you should only pursue grants where you feel confident with your team's ability to complete every part of the process, and that means reporting. So if you are not including enough time for reporting, then that's something where it's better for you to potentially lay low in terms of that extra opportunity and instead just budget an extra week for your team to make sure that you have adequate bandwidth for your reporting requirements. That's something I brought up earlier, but I just want to reaffirm it here because a lot of times people can get, again, really bullish about all the grants they're finding, all the grants they're applying for. They don't realize that they're also going to have a whole new door open when they receive that funding and the reporting requirements come around. The third mistake that people often make is not leaving enough flexibility for opportunities that may arise. Like I mentioned earlier, now that you have your Instrumentl search set up with your project, we've been really diligent in terms of how we set that up. We are always going to have this active grant search that's running for us. And so what that means is that when we sort things by deadline, like I've done here on the right-hand side, well, it means that I might come up with something where it's super opportunistic, but if I have already fully backlogged my team in which we have no bandwidth to tackle that opportunity, well, then that's something in which we're now going to miss on that opportunity until maybe next year. So what I generally recommend for grant writing teams is if you can think about it in sort of like sprints in which, if you think about the month of March, maybe the first 3 weeks of March are focused on opportunities you're going to be able to tackle. And then the last week of March is just a flex week in which maybe it's used for, focusing on reporting requirements. Maybe it's used for coming through some good opportunistic grants. And so the way you'd want to approach that is as you have your first 3 weeks planned out, sometime in weeks 1 and 2 of March, you're going to want to identify a short list of some of the good opportunities that might be opportunistically coming up due towards the end of March. All right. So just having that flexibility for the rolling and the hard deadlines is really, really crucial. All right. Another mistake that folks make when it comes to grants calendars that you want to avoid is not making the grants calendar easily accessible or promoting collaboration. It's really, really important that you do this because a lot of times I hear from grant writers that they feel really alone in their work, to be frank. It's something in which, there's all sorts of expectations put on them by their executive director. It's a stressful job. And then ultimately, it's often that way as well because they're the only one doing everything. And it's something in which they can change that by just thinking about how the overall SOP in their organization is running around their grants calendar. So how can you do this? You can just ensure that everybody actually has the same information that you're operating off of. If, for example, you want to invite folks to your Instrumentl account, you can go to the bottom left corner, click Account, Manage Team, and then invite your executive director, invite your intern, invite your consultant if you're contracting somebody outside, whatever it is. Everybody should be in the same page and have the same information, because then when you're starting to use that task model or that notes model, everybody can see that when it's coming due for each particular task, right? For board members, it can also be done through a PDF report like I shared just earlier in a couple slides ago. But essentially, you can schedule that out where maybe every single week you download that report and you attach it as a PDF. You can do that every other week. And that's something in which it's going to be really great for your board, because then what you can do is you can get into this rhythm where you're maybe sending your board the new opportunities that you saved in your researching section every 2 weeks. They're reviewing whether or not they have an existing relationship to give you the foot in the door to help support you in that way. And then the number 5 mistake to avoid when it comes to creating your grants calendar is not using or iterating on your grants calendar. So I like this GIF on the right-hand side. It's not about perfection here. It's about progress. It's what I emphasized earlier. At this point in time, you will have spent several hours working on this grants calendar. Make sure you actually use it. If your team members are not using it, have that reflection time to actually understand the why behind that and meet the needs of everybody and what they want to see out of the grants calendar. Ultimately, if you're not doing this, then you're just creating work for the sake of creating work, and that gets everybody nowhere. So ultimately, what you want to do is take a step back, iterate on your grants calendar. It should be evolving at least once a year. Maybe you won't have the time to be evolving it every single quarter, but once a year is totally fine as well. All right, if you want a personal walkthrough with Karen and the team and any of your other classmates today in today's cohort, obviously feel free to go back into the chat and you can go ahead and schedule that follow-up time where folks will be able to book a time to kind of walk through the projects that we went through today, get their questions answered and things like that. 5 additional resources I'll share with you. Again, slides will be shared after this workshop, but essentially I have, a grant writing calendar, how to better manage grants posts. I've got how to never miss a grant deadline, how to find funders for grants and so on. All this is available on our blog as well. If you haven't checked it out, it's all free. Just go to instrumentl.com/blog, bookmark it, share it on social media, whatever floats your boat. It's all free content. All right, learning takeaways from today as we start wrapping up. Number 1, grants calendars brings sanity to your grants process. It allows you to scale your grants program. That is what's so powerful about this, is once you have everything in place, it's all kind of running on autopilot, and you're able to really focus on crafting those effective narratives, getting more proposals out, and winning more grants. Number 2, Instrumentl levels up your grants calendar by integrating tracking and management along with prospecting. No other tool does it like us. And so, as I've hopefully shown for you today, there's a lot of power behind this. We just scratched the surface today. If you want to check out our other workshops on this, you can see even more power behind the platform that I wasn't able to cover today. Number 3, regularly reflect and iterate on your grants calendar until it works for you and your team. If you want to follow up with me, my email is will@instrumentl.com. You can use these codes in the case where you enjoy your time with Instrumentl in the next 2 weeks. Workshop 50 will save you $50 off the first month. Workshop 2Mo will save you 2 months off the annual plan instead of the standard 1 month off that you get when you are upgrading. And as I promised everybody for attending live today, I've got a freebie for you. It's 24 pages. And essentially what it is it is a freebie that will help you in terms of going through these 5 steps at your own pace. You can print it out, follow along, and essentially all you need to do is give me feedback on this particular workshop. So I'm going to get you that link in the Zoom chat. And just like that, we're at the 60-minute mark. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in as well while I get this link for you guys right now for this particular freebie. So here is the freebie link, typing that in right now. Discount codes, those discount codes are workshop 50 and workshop 2Mo. And again, slides will be shared as well in the case where any of this, where you want to review anything from today's workshop. Awesome. Just like that, that is our time for today. Thank you so much for attending. If this is your first Instrumentl Grants workshop, we've got a ton of other ones, including some available now on demand. Just check that out on our events calendar. I'll also leave that link in the chat below. If you are already somebody who's been with us for some time, we always appreciate your support. And we'll be live again in a few weeks as well with one of our partner workshops, so feel free to attend then. But other than that, thank you so much, everybody, for attending, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Bye-bye now.